The message blinked on my screen like a slap I couldn't dodge. Mum, don't come. My in-laws don't want you here. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My name is Barbara. I am 58 years old. I am a mother, a businesswoman, and a woman who learned, sometimes too late, that love should never require self-erasure. The room didn't move, but something inside me did. Something slipped. Something cracked. I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hand, dressed halfway, my hair pinned back the way I always did when I wanted to look soft, like the kind of woman people could accept. The dress I'd chosen, navy silk, fitted but modest, hung on the closet door like a promise I'd already broken. And on the bed beside me sat the gift, a framed piece of hand-brushed calligraphy I'd commissioned months ago. Gold ink on white rice paper, my son's name woven into a blessing. I'd paid extra to have it framed in carved walnut. I'd imagined his face when he opened it. I'd imagined gratitude. I read the message again, then again. Each time the words stayed cold and exact, as if he'd carefully typed them with both hands, as if he'd pressed send without a tremor. My throat tightened. I tried to call him. Declined. I called again because the first decline could have been an accident, a slip of the finger, a mistap. Declined again. My mouth went dry. I could feel my heartbeat in my palms. I stared at my son's name on the screen, the same name I'd whispered into his hair when he was little, the same name I'd shouted across soccer fields, the same name I'd used in prayers when he was sick. Raphael. I tried to breathe like a businesswoman, the way I did in boardrooms when numbers didn't add up, when clients tried to corner me, when suppliers threatened delays. In those moments, I was calm, in control. I didn't panic. Panic was for people who didn't have options. But in that bedroom, staring at my son's text, I felt small, not because I didn't have power. God, I had power. I had built an empire from nothing. From late nights and burnt fingers and credit cards I'd maxed out and then paid off with stubbornness. I owned factories, warehouses, showrooms. I'd signed deals that made men twice my age sweat through their collars. And still, one sentence from my son turned me into a woman waiting to be chosen. My eyes drifted to the vanity mirror. My lipstick was already on, soft rose, a shade that said I wasn't trying too hard. A shade that said I belonged in the photos. I didn't. My thumb hovered over his name again, but something stopped me. Something heavier than pride, heavier than humiliation. I had paid for that party. I had paid for the flowers, the catering, the custom invitations with their gilded edges. I had paid for the house itself. Their house? No, let me say it the way it actually was. The mansion I bought for my daughter-in-law's parents. A mansion in Maple Ridge Estates. The kind of neighborhood that had gates and security booths and lawns so perfect they looked painted. The kind of place that made people speak a little softer when they walked into it, as if wealth was a religion and you had to show reverence. 3 months earlier, my son had come to my office after closing. The showroom lights were dimmed, the staff gone, the smell of fresh wood and fabric still hanging in the air. He sat across from me like a boy again, hands folded, shoulders slightly hunched, like he was asking for permission to breathe. "Mum," he said, and his eyes were too careful. Lissa's parents, they're getting older. Their biggest dream is to have a home worthy of them. Worthy. That word should have tasted bitter then. It should have warned me. But I only heard what I always heard when my son spoke in that voice. Please, don't make me choose. Make this easy for me. I asked which house. He showed me photos on his phone, wide windows, marble floors, a staircase that curved like a ribbon. He said the air was cleaner there. He said it would mean the world to Lissa. He said, after this, Mom, they'll finally accept you. Accept you, as if I was the one who needed proving. As if the years of sacrifice, the quiet checks written without complaint, the help I offered that somehow became obligation. As if none of that, I tried to refuse. I even said the words out loud, "Raphael, this is unreasonable." He looked down and swallowed, and I watched my grown son, my only child, become small in front of me. "I'm ashamed," he whispered. "I can't make them happy." That did it. It always did. Shame was my weakness. His shame, not mine. Because I knew where that shame came from. It came from them. From Lissa and her parents, who wore entitlement like perfume. From the little comments slipped into dinner conversations. From the way Lucia, my daughter-in-law's mother, would tilt her head and say, "Oh, Barbara, you're so career-focused," as if that was a polite way to call me unfeminine. From the way Anthony, her husband, would smile too widely and ask about my company, only to follow it with, "Must be nice to get lucky." Lucky, as if I hadn't bled for every inch. Still I said yes, because I loved my son, and because part of me, God help me, still believed love could purchase peace. So I handled everything. I negotiated with the developer. I sat through inspections. I signed documents with ink that cost more than some people's rent. I transferred deposits from accounts I'd built over decades. And while I did all of that, Lissa and her parents floated in and out like royalty, appearing only to pick paint colours and criticise timelines. They never asked how I was. They only asked when it would be ready. When the house was finally completed, they planned a housewarming party so grand it felt like a coronation. Lucia wanted imported flowers. Lissa wanted a string quartet. Raphael wanted to impress her family so badly, his voice shook when he talked about it. And I paid. I paid for everything, right down to the uniforms for servers I'd never meet. But the night of the party, the night I'd been told I was the guest of honor, my own son sent me a text telling me not to come. My hands trembled as I lowered my phone. Somewhere inside my chest, something began to change shape. It wasn't just pain anymore. Pain was familiar. I'd swallowed pain like medicine for years. This was something else. This was the sound of a door locking from the inside. I stood slowly, the silk dress brushing my fingertips as I passed it. I looked at the gift on the bed, the blessing I'd bought for a family that didn't want me in their photos. My lips parted, but no sound came out. Not a sob, not a scream. Just silence. I walked to my desk, opened the bottom drawer and pulled out my second phone, the one I used for business, the one filled with contacts who didn't pretend to love me while draining me dry. The screen lit my face in a cool glow, and I saw myself reflected in the black glass. Lipstick perfect, eyes hollow, jaw set. I scrolled to my bank advisor's name, Mr. Martin. My finger hovered for half a second. Then I pressed call. The line connected on the second ring. "Good evening, Mrs. Hayes," Martin said, his voice smooth, professional, unbothered by the hour. "Is everything all right?" "No," I said. My voice surprised me. It didn't shake. It didn't crack. It sounded calm. Too calm. "I need you to cancel every recurring payment connected to the Maple Ridge property. Utilities, services, escrow transfers, all of it, immediately." There was a pause. I could hear the faint tapping of keys. "May I ask why, Mrs. Hayes?" "You may," I replied. "But you won't get an answer tonight. You'll get instructions." Another pause. Longer this time. "All right. I can suspend the secondary payments right now. The final transfer. I want it frozen." I cut in. "The full amount. The one that cleared this afternoon." Silence. Then his breath drawn in sharply. "Mrs. Hayes, the payment has already been sent. Freezing it will require legal review." "Then start the review," I said. "Tonight." "On what grounds?" I leaned back in my chair and stared at the darkened window, at my reflection layered over the city lights. "Undue influence," I said, "and misrepresentation." He didn't argue. He knew better. "I'll alert legal and flag the transaction. I'll call you back within the hour." "Good," I said. Then, almost as an afterthought, "and cancel every supplementary card linked to my main account, permanently." "Your son's cards as well?" "Yes." "All of them?" all of them. When the call ended, I sat there for a long moment, phone pressed to my ear even though the line was dead. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was steady, focused, the way it got when I was closing a deal and knew the other side had underestimated me. I stood and walked toward the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at myself again. The woman in the mirror looked composed, almost serene. But behind my eyes, memories were lining up like evidence. I remembered the first time Lucia had made me feel small. It was at Lisa and Raphael's engagement dinner. She'd clinked her glass and smiled sweetly before saying, "Of course, Barbara has done very well for herself, but we all know money isn't everything. A woman should also know when to step back and let family take care of things." People laughed. I'd smile too, because that's what women like me were trained to do: absorb the insult, keep the peace. I remembered Anthony asking, again and again, why I wouldn't transfer some of my assets to Raphael for efficiency. I remembered Lissa sighing dramatically whenever I said no, as if I were being unreasonable for wanting control over what I'd built with my own hands. And I remembered the night before the party, when I'd gone back to the penthouse, my penthouse, and found them all there, spread across my living room like it belonged to them. Fabric samples on my table, champagne in my glasses, laughter that stopped just a second too late when I walked in. That was when I'd heard it. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop. I'd gone to my bedroom to change, left the door slightly open because the air felt heavy. Raphael's voice drifted down the hallway low and careless. "Yes, Dad, everything's set. She transferred the money today." A pause, then laughter. My son's laughter. "No, she doesn't suspect anything," Raphael said. She's too naive." The word hit me harder than any insult Lucia had ever thrown. Too naive. Lissa's voice followed, sharp and amused. "And after the party?" Another pause. Raphael lowered his voice. "You know what to do." I stood frozen, my hand on the edge of the bed, the room tilting slightly. I didn't know what to do meant. Not exactly. But I knew it wasn't good. I knew it involved me stepping back, being erased, becoming unnecessary now that my purpose had been served. I hadn't slept that night. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was tired, that my son wouldn't do that to me. And yet, here I was, uninvited, unwanted, discarded with a single text. My phone buzzed in my hand. "Martin." "Legal has reviewed the file," he said. "The contract lists Lucia Turner as the purchaser. You are named as guarantor and sole source of funds." "Perfect," I said. "There may be grounds to challenge the transfer," he continued carefully, "but it will escalate quickly. I'm counting on it." Another buzz cut in before he could respond. Raphael. My personal phone was lighting up now, vibrating on the counter like it was alive. I didn't pick it up. Martin cleared his throat. "I should also inform you that cancelling the supplementary cards has gone through. They are inactive as of now." I smiled. Not wide, not cruel, just enough to feel the edge of it. "Thank you, Martin." When the call ended, I finally picked up my personal phone. Missed calls, 5, then 10, then a message. "Mum, where are you?" "The event manager says the payment didn't go through." Another message followed immediately. "Please answer." This is embarrassing. Embarrassing. I imagined him standing there in his tailored suit, guests milling around, Lucia's smile starting to twitch at the corners. I imagined Lissa's eyes narrowing as waiters slowed, as champagne stopped flowing. And for the first time that night, I felt something close to satisfaction. I set the phone down without replying and made another call. Mr. Stevens, the sales director at Maple Ridge Estates, answered with his usual enthusiasm. "Mrs. Hayes, I hope you're enjoying the housewarming." "Mr. Stevens," I said calmly, "there's been a misunderstanding regarding property A12. A beat. "I'm sorry." "I am the primary payer and guarantor," I said. I am formally withdrawing my consent for the transfer, effective immediately. That's highly irregular, he stammered. The keys have already been— Then I suggest you contact your legal department, I interrupted, because if this property is occupied while under dispute, your company will be implicated. Silence. Then, I'll dispatch a team right away. Do that, I said. And Mr. Stevens? Yes? Stop the party. When I ended the call, my phone began buzzing non-stop. Raphael, Lucia, Lissa. Names flashing like warnings I'd ignored for years. I finally answered. Mum, Raphael burst out, his voice cracked and sharp. What did you do? I closed my eyes. Exactly what you asked, I said softly. What does that mean? He demanded. You told me not to come, I replied. So I didn't. There was shouting in the background. Lucia's voice, high and panicked. Lissa crying. Fix this, Raphael said. Please just call the bank, call the developer. This has gone too far. I opened my eyes and looked around my apartment. The clean lines, the art I'd chosen, the life I'd built. No, I said, and this is exactly far enough. I hung up. Minutes later, the messages poured in, pleading, furious, desperate. I ignored them all. I poured myself a glass of water and sat down, the quiet settling around me like a blanket. Somewhere across the city, music had stopped. Guests were leaving, doors were being sealed, and for the first time in years, I wasn't the one cleaning up someone else's mess. I was done being naive. The silence didn't last long. My phone buzzed again, harder this time, like it was angry with me. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Mothers know the weight of their children's calls, even when they're grown. I let it ring, once, twice, 3 times. When it stopped, my apartment felt unnaturally still, like the pause before a storm breaks. I walked into the bathroom and ran warm water into the tub, dropped in a lavender bath bomb I'd been saving for a special night. The water turned milky, fragrant. My hands were steady as I slipped out of my clothes and sank in. I expected tears to come then, in the quiet, when I was alone and defenseless. They didn't. My chest ached, yes, but it was a clean ache, sharp and focused, not the messy sobbing I'd known for years. From the vanity, my phone lit up again. Raphael calling, then again, then Lucia, then Lissa. I watched the screen glow and fade, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine anymore. I closed my eyes and let the warmth soak into my bones. Somewhere in the city, my sun was unraveling. Somewhere Lucia was screaming at waiters. Somewhere Lissa was realizing that the life she'd been showing off online had been built on money she never earned. And I was soaking in peace. When I finally stepped out of the bath, wrapped in a towel, the messages had turned frantic. Mum, answer me. Please, this is serious. They're sealing the house. The guests are leaving. What did you tell them? I scrolled through the chaos without responding, then dried my hair slowly, deliberately. I put on soft cotton pajamas, poured myself ginger tea and sat on the sofa like I was waiting for guests who were already too late. The knock came an hour later, sharp. Desperate. Not the polite knock of someone who felt welcome. I didn't jump. I didn't rush. I walked to the door at my own pace and checked the security screen. Raphael stood there, tie loosened, hair dishevelled. Behind him, Lissa clutched his arm. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. Lucia stood slightly apart, her face pale, her mouth pressed into a thin, furious line. Expensive clothes. Empty hands. I opened the door. Mum, Raphael said, relief flooding his face like he'd been drowning. Thank God. You have to fix this. I stepped back and let them in without a word. They flooded my living room, voices overlapping, panic spilling everywhere. Lucia was the loudest. Do you have any idea what you've done? She shouted. You humiliated us, in front of everyone. Lissa's voice cracked. Mrs. Barbara, please. This must be a misunderstanding. You wouldn't do this to family. Family. The word hung in the air, heavy and false. Raphael grabbed my hands. "Mom, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have sent that text. I didn't mean it like that." I pulled my hands away gently, like you do when touching something hot. "Sit down," I said. They froze. Then slowly, they obeyed. Even Lucia, though she huffed as she lowered herself onto the couch like it offended her dignity. I sat across from them, tea steaming in my hands. I noticed how tired they looked, how human, how suddenly small. "Tell me," I said calmly, "what was the plan after the party?" Raphael blinked. "What plan?" "The one you laughed about on the phone," I replied. "The one where I was too naive." The room went silent. Lissa's eyes darted to Raphael. Lucia's jaw tightened. "You were spying on us?" Lucia snapped. I smiled faintly. "You were in my house." Raphael swallowed. "Mom, I didn't mean—" "Don't," I said. My voice didn't rise, but it hardened. "Just answer." He looked down. "We were going to talk to you about boundaries, about stepping back." "After I paid for the house," I said. Lissa started crying openly now. "We just needed stability," she sobbed. "My parents, they were counting on it." "And what about me?" I asked quietly. What was I counting on? No one answered. Lucia scoffed. "You're exaggerating. You always do this. Turn generosity into leverage." That did it. Something inside me clicked into place. "Leverage?" I repeated. "You mean the leverage of paying for your lifestyle, of funding your dreams, of being treated like a walking wallet and then told not to show my face?" Lucia stood up. "You're selfish." I stood too. The room shifted. Even Raphael straightened instinctively, like he recognized the woman standing in front of him now. "Everything you have," I said, my voice steady, "came from me. This apartment, the car you drive, the job title you like to brag about, that house you were dancing in an hour ago." Raphael shook his head. "Mum, please." "I'm not finished," I said. Lucia laughed bitterly. "You think money makes you powerful." "No," I said. "Clarity does." I walked to the door of the spare room and opened it. Inside were suitcases. 3 of them, packed neatly. Raphael stared. "What is this?" "Your things," I said. "The things I bought that you're allowed to keep." Lissa gasped. "You're kicking us out?" "I'm reclaiming my space," I replied. "And my life." Lucia lunged forward. "You can't do this." I raised my hand and she stopped. Something in my eyes must have warned her. "You used me," I said. "You mocked me, and you taught my son that I was disposable." Raphael's face crumpled. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't think you'd actually—" "Choose myself," I finished. I walked to the door and opened it wide. "Leave." Lissa collapsed into tears. Lucia hissed curses under her breath. Raphael hesitated, searching my face for the mother who used to bend. She wasn't there anymore. They left. I locked the door behind them, turned the bolt and leaned my forehead against the wood. My chest ached again. But this time, it felt like healing. Outside, their voices faded down the hallway. Inside, I stood alone, free. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was restless, but because my mind was finally quiet, and I wasn't used to the sound of it. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the city outside my windows, thinking about how strange it felt to be alone in a space that had always been crowded by other people's needs. Around dawn, my phone buzzed again. A message from Raphael. "Mum, please." "We have nowhere to go." I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Nowhere to go. The irony almost made me laugh. I'd spent years making sure he always had somewhere to land, somewhere soft. I'd been the net beneath every reckless step. And now, for the first time, the ground was hard. I didn't reply. By mid-morning, the story had already begun spreading, not in headlines, not yet, but in whispers, the kind that move faster than facts. My assistant called to inform me that a developer's legal team had reached out. My lawyer left a calm voicemail telling me everything was proceeding as expected. Martin sent written confirmation that all accounts linked to Raphael were frozen and that the disputed transfer was under formal investigation. Each message landed like a brick, sealing a wall. Late that afternoon, I finally left the apartment. I dressed simply. Tailored slacks, a cream blouse, low heels. No armour, no softness either, just myself. The lobby was quiet when I stepped out, but the security guard looked at me differently, respectfully, carefully. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, hesitating. "Your son was here earlier." I nodded once. "He won't be coming back." He swallowed and stepped aside. "Understood." The drive to my office felt surreal. The city moved the same way it always had. Cars honking, people rushing, vendors shouting. But I felt detached from it all, like I'd stepped out of a burning building and was watching the smoke from across the street. When I arrived, my COO met me at the elevator. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. "I am," I said, and realized it was true. I spent the day buried in work, real work. Numbers that mattered, contracts that demanded attention, people who valued my time instead of draining it. And for the first time in months, I felt efficient, clear, alive. Around 6, my phone rang again. Lucia. I almost didn't answer. Almost. "What do you want?" I asked. Her voice was hoarse, smaller than I'd ever heard it. "We need to talk." "We already did." "You ruined us," she said. "You took everything." I leaned back in my chair. "I took back what was mine." "You're heartless," she snapped weakly. I closed my eyes. "No," I said. "I was heartless when I kept paying to be disrespected." She inhaled sharply. "Raphael is your son." "Yes," I said, "and that's why this hurts. But it's also why it ends here." She hung up without another word. That night I went home and cooked for myself. Nothing fancy. Rice, soup, food that warmed instead of impressed. I ate at the table alone, not scrolling, not checking messages, just chewing slowly, tasting each bite. It felt like reclaiming something basic and human. Days passed, then weeks. The house at Maple Ridge Estates was officially repossessed. The party deposit was forfeited. Legal notices were sent. Word spread quietly but efficiently that I was no longer funding my son's lifestyle. Invitations stopped coming from certain circles. Others increased. The ones who stayed, the ones who didn't ask questions but offered presents. Those were the ones that mattered. Raphael tried again, and again. Sometimes angry, sometimes broken. Once, he showed up at my office unannounced. I watched him through the glass walls as security stopped him. He looked thinner, smaller. He caught my eye for a brief second before looking away. I didn't go out to him. That was the hardest part. Not the legal battles, not the humiliation they faced, not even the loneliness that crept in during quiet evenings. It was the discipline of not rescuing. I'd confused love with saving for too long. Months later, I saw him by accident. At a grocery store near my apartment, he was wearing a jacket that didn't quite fit, scanning prices like they mattered now. When our eyes met, his face drained of colour. "Mum," he said softly. I nodded. "Raphael." He hesitated. "I'm working now." "I know," I said, and I did. My assistant had mentioned it in passing, a delivery job. Long hours, little pay. "I'm trying," he added. "I hope so," I said. Not cold, just honest. He waited, like he was expecting more, an invitation, an apology, something to ease the weight on his shoulders. I didn't give it. "I should go," I said. He nodded, swallowing. "I'm sorry." I paused, just for a moment. "I believe you," I said. "But believing you doesn't mean undoing everything." I walked away before he could respond. That night, I cried. Not because I doubted my choice, but because it had cost me something real. Love doesn't disappear just because you draw boundaries. It lingers. It aches. It reminds you of what was and what could have been. But beneath the grief was something steadier. Peace. A year later, my company signed its largest international contract to date. I stood on a stage in Milan, lights bright, cameras flashing, answering questions about leadership and resilience. Someone asked me how I balanced family and success. I smiled. I learned, I said, that sacrifice should never require self-erasure. The applause was polite, but the truth of it settled deep inside me. That night, back in my hotel room, I looked at my phone. There was one message, from Raphael. "I hope you're happy," I typed back slowly. "I am learning to be." I set the phone down and walked to the window, watching the city glow beneath me. I thought about the woman I'd been, the one who mistook endurance for love, silence for grace, money for acceptance. And I thought about who I was becoming. I didn't lose a son that night. I lost an illusion. And in its place, I found myself. The strange thing about choosing yourself is that the world doesn't collapse the way you were always told it would. Weeks turned into months and my life didn't shrink. It expanded. Slowly at first, then all at once. I stopped waking up with that tight knot in my chest, the one that came from anticipating demands before they were even spoken. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes, bracing for guilt disguised as love. Silence became something gentle instead of threatening. But peace has a way of stirring old ghosts. One evening, long after the legal dust had settled, my lawyer called to inform me that Raphael had officially contested the severance. Not because he had a strong case, he didn't, but because desperation makes people reckless. "He's asking for mediation," she said carefully. "He claims emotional coercion." I laughed softly, then surprised myself by crying. Emotional coercion. The phrase twisted in my chest. For years, I'd wrapped my sacrifices in silence, never calling them what they were. I'd convinced myself that being needed was the same as being loved, that if I just gave a little more, bent a little further, I would finally earn a place that was never meant to be conditional. "I'll attend," I said after a pause. The mediation room was small, neutral, deliberately stripped of warmth. Raphael sat across from me, his shoulders hunched, hands folded tightly together. He looked older than his years, worn, not ruined, but reshaped by reality. He didn't meet my eyes at first. "I didn't realize how much you were doing," he said quietly. I thought it was just how things were." "That's the problem," I replied. "You thought my sacrifices were invisible, automatic." He swallowed. "They made me choose." "No," I said gently. "They revealed your choice." The mediator shifted uncomfortably. Raphael's eyes finally lifted to mine, and for a moment I saw the boy I used to tuck in at night, the one who clutched my sleeve when thunder shook the windows. "I miss you," he said. The words landed heavily. I felt them everywhere, in my ribs, my throat, my hands. "I miss who you were with me," I replied, "and I miss who I was before I let myself disappear." The mediation ended without resolution. He wanted restoration. I wanted recognition. Those two things didn't live in the same room. After that, I stopped hearing from him. Lucia's health declined rapidly. I heard it through distant connections, through people who spoke in hushed tones like it was gossip wrapped in pity. High blood pressure, complications, a body buckling under years of bitterness and performance. Lissa had moved back into her childhood bedroom, the walls still painted the same colour she'd hated as a teenager. Their lives had folded inward. Mine unfolded outward. I began volunteering again, not as a donor, not as a name on a plaque, but as a woman with time and hands. I found myself drawn back to an orphanage I'd quietly supported for years, long before the chaos. The children there didn't know my history. They didn't care what I'd lost or what I'd reclaimed. They cared whether I listened, whether I stayed. I did. On weekends, I sat on the floor with them, reading stories, braiding hair, laughing at jokes that didn't make sense. I felt useful in a way that didn't cost me pieces of myself. One afternoon, a little girl climbed into my lap and asked, "Do you have a family?" The question caught me off guard. "I do," I said slowly, "but I'm learning what that really means." She nodded, satisfied, and fell asleep against my chest. That night, I understood something I hadn't before. Love isn't proven by how much you give until there's nothing left. It's proven by whether you're allowed to exist fully within it. A year passed. The court ruled fully in my favour. The severance stood. The debts were formalised. Raphael didn't attend the final hearing. I didn't ask why. Instead, I celebrated quietly, not with champagne or speeches, but with a small gathering at the orphanage, balloons, warm food, laughter echoing off simple walls. I watched the children eat, watched the caregivers smile, and felt something settle into place inside me. This was enough. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in amber and rose, my assistant handed me my phone. "He tried again," she said softly. Raphael had left a voicemail. I listened to it alone. "Mum," he said, his voice steadier than before. "I don't expect anything. I understand now. I think. I wanted you to know that. Freedom didn't arrive all at once. It came in quiet waves, in moments so small I almost missed them. The first time I woke up on a Sunday with nowhere I was expected to be. The first time I made a decision without mentally calculating how Raphael or Lissa or Lucia would react. The first time I said no without rehearsing an apology in my head. But freedom also has a shadow, and sometimes it asks you to sit with memories you'd buried just to survive. One night, months after everything had settled into a new shape, I pulled out an old photo album I hadn't opened in years. The leather cover was cracked, the pages yellowed. I hadn't touched it since before Raphael married Lissa, before my role in his life began to shrink into something transactional. There he was, my son at 5, missing his front tooth, his arms wrapped around my leg. Me at 30, tired but smiling, holding him on my hip while balancing a phone in my other hand, negotiating my first major contract. I remembered that day vividly. I'd closed the deal in the parking lot of his school because I couldn't afford to miss pickup. Back then, I believed I was building a future for both of us. Somewhere along the way, that belief twisted into obligation. I closed the album and rested it on my chest, the weight of it familiar and aching. I didn't regret loving him. I regretted teaching him, without meaning to, that my love came with unlimited access. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was my assistant. "Mrs. Hayes, there's a woman downstairs asking to see you." "Who?" I asked. She says it's urgent. Her name is Lissa." My heart didn't race this time. It didn't even skip. It just tightened slightly, like an old scar being pressed. "I'll come down," I said. Lissa stood in the lobby, hands clasped tightly together, her coat too thin for the season. She looked nothing like the woman who used to glide through my living room critiquing decor and budgets. Her eyes were hollow, rimmed red, her posture folded inward. She looked young, in a way she never had before. "Mrs. Barbara," she whispered when she saw me. "Not Mom, not mother-in-law, just my name." "What do you want, Lissa?" I asked, keeping my voice level. She swallowed hard. I needed to see you, to say something." I waited. "I was wrong," she said quickly, as if the words might escape her if she didn't rush. "About everything. About you. About what I thought you owed us." I studied her face. There was no performance in it now, no audience, just exhaustion. "Why now?" I asked. She looked down. Because I finally understand what it's like to lose everything you thought made you important. The honesty startled me. I don't expect forgiveness, gosh, she added. I couldn't keep carrying it without saying it. I nodded slowly. I accept your apology. Her eyes widened slightly, like she hadn't expected that. But, I continued, accepting it doesn't mean inviting you back into my life. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She nodded, pressing her lips together to keep from sobbing. I know, she said. I just needed you to know that I see you now. I hope you also see yourself, I replied gently, because that's the only way you'll survive what comes next. She thanked me. She didn't ask for help. She didn't ask for money. When she turned to leave, she looked lighter, still broken, but no longer pretending. I watched her walk out through the glass doors and disappear into the city. That was the moment I realized something important. Closure doesn't always come from reconciliation. Sometimes it comes from truth spoken too late, but still spoken. Time moved forward, as it always does. My work flourished in ways I hadn't imagined. Without the constant drain of emotional negotiations, I made bolder decisions. Expanded faster, trusted my instincts without second-guessing them. My name began appearing in interviews, not as a successful mother behind the scenes, but simply as a leader. One interviewer asked me what motivated me now. I thought about it carefully before answering. Peace, I said, and integrity. The word integrity felt new in my mouth, like something I was finally allowed to claim. On the anniversary of the night, everything fell apart. The party, the text, the door closing. I went back to Maple Ridge Estates alone. I parked across the street from the sealed property, now relisted, empty, stripped of the fantasy it once held. I didn't feel anger. I felt gratitude. Because that house had never been about bricks or marble or chandeliers. It had been a mirror. And when it shattered, it showed me the truth. I drove away without looking back. That evening I returned home and poured myself a glass of wine. I stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker on one by one, each one belonging to someone else's story, someone else's heartbreak or hope. My phone buzzed softly, a message from Raphael. I hesitated before opening it. Mum, I don't expect you to reply. I just wanted to say, I'm learning how to stand on my own. It's hard, but I think it's supposed to be. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back, I hope you keep learning. That was all. I set the phone down and felt something settle. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but acceptance. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't ask for applause. I no longer wondered if I had done the right thing, because the right thing doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels lonely. Sometimes it feels like grief. But sometimes it feels like finally coming home to yourself. I used to think endings came with certainty, with a final conversation, a clean apology, a moment where everything lined up and made sense. I believed that if I waited long enough, if I stayed open enough, patient enough, life would eventually reward me with closure that felt complete. But the truth is quieter than that. The truth is, endings don't announce themselves. They settle into your bones slowly, like weather changing. One day you realize you're no longer bracing for impact. One day you realize the ache has softened into memory. One day you realize you're not waiting anymore. That realization came to me on an ordinary morning. I was standing in my kitchen, sunlight spilling across the counter, making dust particles glow like they were alive. I was making coffee, strong, black, the way I like it now. No one had complained it was too bitter. No one had asked me to add sugar, to soften it, to make it more palatable. I smiled at that. I carried the mug to the window and watched the city wake up. Cars moved, people hurried. Somewhere families were arguing over breakfast. Somewhere else, someone was being betrayed for the first time. Somewhere, a mother was choosing silence because she thought love demanded it. I whispered, almost without realizing it, "It doesn't." That morning, I received an email from an international magazine confirming a long-form interview they wanted to run. The subject line read, "Power, Boundaries, and Reinvention." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Power. For years, I'd misunderstood that word. I thought power was what allowed people to take from me. I thought it was what made them confident enough to dismiss me. I thought it lived in money, influence, access. I know better now. Power is knowing when to stop. Power is walking away without needing to be understood. Power is loving someone enough to let them face the consequences of who they chose to be. Later that week, I visited the orphanage again. It had become a rhythm in my life. Friday afternoons, simple clothes, no schedule. The children ran toward me when I arrived, their laughter loud and unfiltered. One of the caregivers pulled me aside to show me the renovations my donation had helped fund. Fresh paint, new beds, warm light. "You didn't have to do all this," she said. I shook my head. "I did," I replied. For me, that was the difference now. Everything I gave came from choice, not pressure. From fullness, not fear. As I sat on the floor helping a boy with his homework, I felt a presence behind me. I turned, expecting another child. It was Raphael. He stood in the doorway, hesitant, unsure if he was allowed to exist in my world like this. He looked healthier than the last time I'd seen him. Still tired, but steadier. Like someone who had stopped fighting the ground beneath his feet and learned to stand on it. "I didn't know you came here," he said quietly. "I didn't advertise it, I replied. He nodded. "I'm volunteering down the street, a few hours a week." I studied his face, searching for expectation. There was none. "I won't stay long," he added quickly. "I just wanted to say hello." I gestured to the empty chair beside me. "You can sit?" He did. We didn't talk much. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no tears, no promises, just two people sharing space, helping children colour inside lines that didn't matter. After a while he stood. "I won't ask for anything," he said. "I know better now." I met his eyes. "Good." He hesitated, then asked, "Are you happy?" The question was different this time, not needy, not searching for reassurance, just curious. I answered honestly. "Yes," I said, "I am." He nodded, absorbing it, then left without looking back. I didn't cry. I didn't feel victorious. I felt something better. Whole. That night, I sat alone on my balcony, wrapped in a light sweater, the city humming below me. My phone lay untouched on the table. No messages waiting, no fires to put out, no one depending on me to hold their life together. I thought about the woman I'd been the night I received that text. The woman in the silk dress staring at her phone, still believing love meant endurance. I wished I could reach back through time and touch her shoulder. I would tell her this: "You are not cruel for choosing yourself. You are not selfish for closing doors that drain you. You are not a bad mother for refusing to be used. Love without respect is not love. Sacrifice without boundaries is not virtue. And silence is not peace. Peace is waking up without fear. Peace is saying no without shaking. Peace is recognizing that being needed is not the same as being cherished." That night, I slept deeply. No dreams, no nightmares, just rest. And when I woke the next morning, sunlight filled the room again, warm and forgiving. I took a deep breath and smiled, because in the end, I didn't lose my son. I lost the version of myself who thought love meant disappearing, and in letting her go, I finally came home. This story wasn't just about money, betrayal, or a house. It was about boundaries, about dignity, about finally choosing myself after a lifetime of choosing everyone else. If this story touched something inside you, if it reminded you that your worth does not depend on how much you sacrifice, then it has served its purpose. Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeing me. And thank you for choosing stories that speak the truth.